Welcome back to Color Review, where you suggest movies, I watch them during the day, and tell my wife I'm working.
Hey Barrett, what are you doing?
Working. Earlier this week, I was watching All Quiet on the Western Front and was floored by how good it was. Well, I guess good might be the wrong term about a film about death and tragedy, but we'll say effective. If you aren't familiar with the film, it's a German movie by director Ed Berger and cinematographer James Friend. I'm gonna watch the film, pull some stills, and then we're gonna analyze them to see what we can learn about the color of All Quiet on the Western Front. Wow, what a movie. For the record, I do not endorse watching this movie twice within 4 days. It is way too emotionally brutal. Let's take a look at those stills and start analyzing them. Welcome to the desk. In case you haven't seen the film, let me give you some backstory on the opening. So the film opens following a soldier who soon won't survive the attack on the battlefield. And then we follow the journey of his coat and uniform to a new recruit who's the main character of the film. This first major look at the film is what I might call the cold grit of war. It has a heavy blue bias with contrast that varies a bit due to the fog and haze in the air. The film was shot on the RE65 and Alexa Mini LF cameras, primarily with the RE DNA prime lenses. Now these lenses are cool. They're designed to evoke a lot of that character and texture that we often associate with vintage lenses. The highlights on this uniform sack provide a nice, ghostly, weathered beige tone, and it leans towards the blues of this look. As we look towards the bottom end of the image, we see blacks, and the black levels are a bit elevated, and this is likely a combination of both the grade and the character of those lenses flaring a little bit from the light coming in from the outside. We get some navy tones from the uniform here, as well as some of the slight bit of greenish olive addition of the uniforms in the sack. All in all, we're getting a very drab blue image. Now this look contrasts very markedly with the footage from the following scene, which is these young men signing up for war. We exchange the overall blue bias for some very warm, almost milky highlights. They have that nice warmth to them, and they're not hitting 100% white. Even as we look at these dark coats, you'll notice that beige yellow color is still coming through nicely. In the shadows, we still get some contrasting colors. We get some blues in the shadows, and if I pull this sidewalk, you'll see that looks like it's probably gray in real life, but we're noticing that the blues are definitely coming into it. This scene was actually one of the few where they changed lenses in the film. So instead of using the RE DNA primes, which most of the film was shot on, the cinematographer James Friend used RE Prime 65 S series lenses. He was hoping for that slightly softer image, but still with good contrast and punch. It's a subtle change, but I think it does help us lean into the fact that these boys are young and innocent, and the lenses give a more pure, clean image to lean into that. The black point is still quite high. As I look around the image, I'd say one of the darkest parts might be inside of this car here. If I bring that on the bottom of the screen, I don't know if YouTube's compression is destroying this, but when I look at that color compared to the black letterboxing, I would say that there's a pretty marked difference. That's not even crossing what I would think of as the 5% black or below mark. As we enter the recruitment building, we get some really nice long shots that show us the boys listening to an impassioned speech. And here's a great example of light finessing that I so often talk about. Look at the luminance of the faces within this scene. Who do you want to look at? Well, I feel like my eyes are first drawn to this character right here in the gray suit. But after that, because of the light finessing they did, it goes right to Paul, who's the lead. Look at the way they elevated his face levels compared to everyone else in the scene. I find many artists are scared to finesse the lighting to this level, but I think they pull it off beautifully. You know right where to look. So Paul and his friends get their first taste of war, and we find ourselves back in that cold grit of war look. It's a very overcast day. As we look into the shadows, we see that the shadows still maintain some of those cool tones. As we look up into the sky, it also feels very cold, helps lean into that wet, rainy look. And the black point still is elevated. We're not hitting zero black. Paul very much feels like a fresh soldier who's well-fed and is yet to see the tragedies coming. Now, keep these skin tones in mind. This is a very Hollywood way to grade skin tones, but it doesn't stay like that for long. Let's keep moving. Eventually, they get bombarded by artillery and run for cover in the trench bunker. And we get some amazing lighting. These golden yellows are just stunning. It gives the feel of a very feudal light source that's just enough, but also not super strong. We get a mix of those yellow highlights, some nice orangey skin tones, and also the black levels. Let me kind of put it over here so you can see it. The black is almost a neutral black. This is actually an issue that I see some films that pursue a similar look have. They don't neutralize the shadow elements, and so it can feel overly forced and graded. As the bombardment finishes, Paul emerges muddy and is handed some food. Now look at this bread biscuit thing here, I don't know. It gives this huge warm saturation pop that we don't see anywhere else in this image right now. It cuts through this gloom and mud of the rest of the image. You'll notice in the film that this is a consistent treatment they have of food in the trenches. Here's also where we can glimpse some of the iconic skin tones of this film. We begin to see some pink tones seep through the mud and dirt. It gives the impression of exhaustion, like the blood is just pumping behind the mud. There are times in this film that it feels like Emmanuel Lubezki was involved. Like, look at this shot up this tree. It feels very much like something from the Tree of Life. The film has some of those naturalistic elements that I tend to associate with Lubezki's work, and the many uses of wide shots, lots of natural light, long extended takes. It provides a breath of truth to the visuals. A fun side note from the behind the scenes features is that at times during the interior scenes, they used LED screens outside the windows. And during that, one of the shots you get to see is DaVinci Resolve in use. And it appears that they're using it for live grading of the LED screens. Isn't that fascinating? What, you need to make the outside darker? You got it. A little cooler, a little warmer, the trees need a bit more contrast. Super simple in Resolve. It's pretty amazing. One of my favorite cinematic motifs in the film is James Friend's stunning medium close-ups. He seems to love centering subjects that hit his actor straight on, with really strong separation from the background. The shallow depth of field provides a really beautiful image, allowing us to focus fully on the hero of the shot. It's often coupled by some shapes or symmetry in the background that provide a frame for the character to sit within. And when the camera moves in even closer, it's like we're leaning into that personal conversation. James has mastered the use of these shots. It's truly impressive work. Well, now that we spent most of the movie understanding that cool tones are the danger of the trenches and warm tones point us to more of the safety and good times, they pull a little bit of a trick on us with this attack that happens just over halfway into the film. We start with a very cool look that we've already established, right? Lots of blue bias going on, almost non-existent skin tones, right? They're almost gray in there. But as they successfully invade the trench and clear it out, our leading characters fight their way into a food supply shelter. As the threats die away, they begin eating and the scene gets increasingly warmer, like the sun is rising and danger is leaving. Do you see how they lull us into a sense of security with the color choices? Tanks appear from the fog. Colorist Andrew Daniel mentioned that the VFX team delivered multiple versions of this shot because contrast did so much to play with the fog. So they played with what elements to keep, what elements to get rid of, and ultimately they ended up here. Another thing Andrew mentioned was they enjoyed the use of the camera shake effect in Resolve. Sometimes they used it with the tanks or tank blasts to help liven up the camera movement. Because Resolve is so readily available, he was able to keep grading, while others just grabbed a copy of the project file and experimented on their own devices. Later on in the film, we get another prime example of those pink skin tones. I cannot tell you how intriguing this is to me. In American cinema, we have orange skin tones just drilled into our heads. So much so that if I delivered this to a client, I would be concerned at getting laughed out of the room. But this is why I love international filmmaking. Allowing these pinks to come through makes the weather feel so much colder. It's like the wind has been chilling the skin as they continue to carry on through the exhaustion. It helps it not feel so one-dimensional. There really aren't very many neutral elements in this shot. If we look at the highlights from the snow, that's leaning very cool tone, maybe a hint of cyan, a touch of green in there. If we look at the jackets are also leaning on the cooler side. This tin, which probably was supposed to be in real life, is probably a gray color. But look at the skin. The skin allows those interesting pink tones to start to come through. Traditional orange warm skin tones would hurt the storytelling here. I'm so glad they chose this route. I think some of the last shots of the film create beautiful symbolism. Paul is so encrusted by mud and dirt that it feels like he's a weathered statue. It reminds me of the Statue of Liberty. It has that oxidized, pale blue-green that we often associate with copper statues left out in the elements. And in so many ways, isn't that the point of this film? To serve as a reminder, to serve as a memory, to capture the horror and brutality, and at times, feudal nature with how many lives were lost in World War I. This was a film that grabbed me right from the start and never let go. It's interesting to compare it to 1917, which also was a World War I film. I did a breakdown of that as well if you want to check it out. 1917 at its core was an adventure story, and it served a different purpose than All Quiet on the Western Front. What are your thoughts on this film? Let's keep the discussion going on down in the comments. If you want to see more content like this, hit that like and subscribe button. And if you have a friend who loved this film, would you consider sharing this video with them? I'll see you in the next one.